Welcome to Gen Z Hoops, the Gen Z basketball, coaching, and sports business show.
What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Gen Z Hoops podcast. Today, I'm joined by the radio play-by-play announcer for the Portland Trailblazers, Mr. Travis Demers. Travis, how you doing today, man?
I'm good. Thanks for having me. Appreciate you thinking of me.
Oh, no, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. So I'd like to jump into our little conversation here. So take me through it. What initially first drew you to sports broadcasting, and when at one point in your life did you know it was something that you wanted to do for the rest for your career?
Yeah, I was always interested in sports, even as a little kid, and I've talked about this with a couple of people lately because the baseball playoffs are going on. And I remember being 7 years old, and my parents like sports, but they weren't the kind of parents that have sports on in the house. So if I wanted to watch it, I'd have to go in the other room. So I remember being 7 years old and going into my parents' room to watch the '89 baseball playoffs, the Blue Jays and the A's and the Cubs and Giants in the NLCS and in the World Series that year. And I think of my son who's 7 years old now. I'm like, I can't picture him doing that. He watches when I have it on, but I've always been into sports. My grandmother was a huge baseball fan. She grew up in the Bronx in the 20s and 30s when Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig were playing for the Yankees. So it's her fault. I'm the Yankees fan. And my dad will watch sports with me, and he'll sometimes watch it without me, but it was more me that got him into watching sports than him that got me into watching sports. So I was always watching, and when I was young, my parents made me turn off the TV. It's bedtime, you got to go to bed. And I remember being 12 years old and listening to the Rangers and Devils Game 7 Eastern Conference Finals going to double overtime in '94. And there was a famous goal scored by Stephane Matteau, and I'm listening to Howie Rose call the game on WFAN. And it's like I felt like I was watching the radio, like it was the 1930s or something, and that broadcast, that call, really got me into it. And that was kind of the first moment that I maybe even thought about broadcasting. But once I realized that I wasn't going to play for the Yankees or the Knicks or the Rangers or something like that, it became, this is what I want to do.
So you mentioned I actually am a Yankees fan as well. I
Awesome.
know we have been cursed for like I want to say over like 2 decades, about to be 2 decades. What is
16
your?
years.
I know, man. I went to the World Series last year. Worst experience ever. It was Game 3 when Freeman hit the opening home run.
Yeah,
Amazing experience, but not something I like to remember fully. But let's
right.
enough about that. But what was your favorite Yankees memory growing up?
Oh man. So my father and I, when I was 11 years old, this was 1993. We went to as many games as we could, and that morning we got tickets. My friend Joey, his dad Joe, we heard that a couple of guys in New York named Joe called my dad up. I'm like, hey, we got extra tickets to the Yankee game. It was the weekend before school started, so we went down there, and that was when Jim Abbott. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Jim Abbott, but he threw a no-hitter that day. And so Jim Abbott was born without a right hand. He was a left-hand pitcher. And in the late '80s and early '90s, he was a huge deal. And I was a big Jim Abbott fan. My oldest son's middle name is Abbott.
Wow.
My youngest son's middle name, by the way, is Mantle for Mickey Mantle. Obviously, big Yankees fan. But for me, as a kid, being 11 years old, and at that point in my life, not having experienced postseason baseball as a fan, that was such a huge moment. It was 30 plus years ago, and my father and I still talk about it. It was I don't know if that's my favorite Yankees moment ever, but it's hard to top that.
So earlier on in your career, you worn a lot of hats: host, producer, reporter, play-by-play announcer. So looking back at those earlier days, which of those roles taught you the most about storytelling through sports?
It's interesting because I think all of them did to a degree. When I first moved to Portland, I was doing high school football play-by-play out on the Oregon coast, which is about 100 miles from Portland, but I was living in Portland. And I was working for a couple of different radio stations. One of them, I was, going into the locker room at Trailblazers games and getting post-game sound and then editing it together. This was the 2003, 2004 season. So I'm 21, 22 years old, and I'm in the locker room, and I'm, I usually do the visiting team's locker room. So, there's Shaquille O'Neal and Kobe Bryant and Tim Duncan and Kevin Garnett. Unfortunately, it was a year after Michael Jordan retired, so I didn't get to talk to MJ, but it was LeBron James' rookie year. So there were obviously some great experiences there. But one of my other jobs was basically it's called a board op, where you sit in the studio and you're pushing buttons for commercials and things like that. And the station I was at, we ran Mariners games, we ran a lot of ESPN stuff, college football, NFL, baseball. So I had a lot of time to sit in the studio and listen to radio play-by-play. And I listened to a lot of radio growing up with the teams that I liked, but it exposed me to different broadcasters. Obviously, the Mariners broadcasters, Dave Niehaus, who has since passed, Rick Riz, Dave Sims, who's now with the Yankees, national broadcasters on ESPN and Westwood One and things like that. So really hearing so many different broadcasters, including Kevin Calabro, who I get to work with now with the Trailblazers, do different sports and hear different styles and see, different ways that the same job could be done. It was really fascinating to me, and it taught me a lot.
So you spent time as a sports update anchor and host for SiriusXM in
Yeah.
Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
How did that national experience shape your voice and professionalism behind the mic?
Yeah, it was really good for me because at that point I had moved there in March of 2011. I had been in Portland for 7.5 years, and Portland's a medium market station, 23 somewhere like that. And I had worked a little bit. I had interned at ABC Sports Radio in New York when I was in college, and worked there as a producer for a little bit. But having the opportunity after being in the business for a little bit and seeing how it was done at some places, and then going to a bigger place that had, that national opportunity. I worked with people who were more experienced than I was. I worked with people who have better voices than I do, who have done it for a long time, who have a lot of connections and things like that. So it it helps you raise your game, right? You're not that I was ever a big fish in a small pond in Portland, but you're in a much bigger pond now in DC and in New York, because we had at the time Sirius and XM were separate and had just merged together to make Sirius XM. So some of the operations were in DC, some of the operations were in New York, and they're still that way. So I was in DC where they had MLB Network Radio and Fantasy Sports Radio, PGA Tour Radio. I can't remember what else they had there. But having the opportunity to work with some of those guys who were former professional athletes or had been hosts in different markets, and hearing the way that it was done on that level, it makes you want to be better. And you know what it's like as a basketball player, that you get better when you're competing against people that are better than you.
Right.
It's a similar thing in radio, right? If you're, and really probably any field, if you're surrounded by people who are on a higher level than you, there are two things you can do. You can fold and that's it. That's the end of your career, or it can push you to be better. And for me, it pushed me to be better.
So since I like how you reference like your earlier on days in your professional career to the basketball. My coach a lot of the time talks about finding your voice as like a leader, because like leadership
Yeah.
is like a big thing. So like usually when you're a underclassman, like a freshman or a sophomore, you really don't have a voice in the locker room as much, but you start developing your voice in like different ways in little increments, so that when you're a junior and senior, you
Yeah.
can project it more and take the leadership reins of the team. So transitioning that to the professional state, how early on in your career did you find your voice on the mic?
Man, it took a long time. It took a long time for me because for a couple of reasons. One, I was always a shy kid. I think if anybody met me in my teens and was like, "Yeah, that guy's going to be on the radio," like, yeah, no way. Like, I was shy. I was, socially awkward. I'm still socially awkward, but when you have that feeling of like, okay, I'm on the radio. I really don't want to screw up, and I don't want people judging me. When you start to tune that out, you're able to really get better and focus on what it is that you're doing. And it's taken me a long time to do that. Finding something that you're comfortable with, and knowing that you're good at it and being comfortable with that. for me, it's always been play-by-play. I've been an update anchor, I've been a talk show host, I've been a sideline reporter, as far as on-air things. Behind the scenes, I've been in management, I've been a producer, I've done all kinds of things. But for me, when I'm talking about sports, especially when it's something that I know really well, that's when all that other stuff goes away and you forget about it. And that's confidence, and really it comes with preparation. When you're talking about something that um, it's easier to be confident because going in, you know the details of everything, you know all the different ways that things can go. Preparation is so important. And when I was doing a daily talk show, which I did for a long time, we would prep for, 3 hours together for a 3 hour show, my partner Chad Doing and I. And that was after we had already done all of the things that we had done on our own. We would come in and for a 3 o'clock show, we would, get up on a whiteboard and plan out where we were going with everything. With play by play, it's more on your own and making sure, obviously you work as a team, but making sure that you have all of your information and that you know everything that's going to be happening. So for me, it's been preparation that has led to being more confident.
So on terms of hosting your own show and on-air competence as well, in 2012 you actually started hosting Travis and Wilcox,
Yep.
and later on Sports Night with Travis Demers.
Yep.
How did hosting your own show influence your own on-air confidence as well as your ability to guide conversations? Because you did reference being a pretty shy kid growing up.
Yeah. So at that point, that was after I went to Sirius XM. And when I was there, I had an opportunity to host on the college sports channel. So I was doing, a lot of college football, a lot of college basketball. It was all college sports. And I didn't really see a future as a regular host there. So I got a call from the station that I had worked at, the ESPN affiliate in Portland, and they asked me to come back after about a year and a half. And I was working with a guy named Josh Wilcox, who had played briefly in the NFL, but he was a former Oregon Duck, played in the Rose Bowl. His father was a Pro Football Hall of Fame linebacker with the 49ers. His brother is currently the head coach at Cal. Really, really good football guy. And in this area, yes, the NFL is important. You could talk the NFL 365 days a year, but college football is huge. Especially, you know, lately not as much with the Oregon State Beavers, but
Right.
the Oregon Ducks. So working with someone like Josh, who played for Oregon and knew that program inside and out, those were his strengths. He knew the NFL. He had a lot of connections in the NFL because of his family, but he also knew football. I knew basketball because I'd done a lot of things with the Trailblazers. That was more my strength. Uh, I love baseball, but in Portland, you don't really talk a whole lot of baseball,
Right.
right? It's NFL, college football, and the NBA, and then when other major stories come up. So having the opportunity to work with him, and we had very different strengths, and there were times where we butted heads, and working through that, it was definitely a learning experience because you learn that a couple of things, like yes, you want to talk about things that are important to you and that you're passionate about, but you have to, play the hits is what they say. So
Right.
if it's September in Oregon, you're talking Duck football, you're talking NFL, you're probably talking some Beavers. And even though it's the pennant races in baseball, you're not talking about that. So finding the right areas to go. And when you're working with someone who knows a lot more about something than you do, like Josh did with college football, it's setting him up and letting him shine. I was, I had more of a strength in basketball. So it was me driving those conversations about the Trailblazers and things like that. And then after a couple of years, they shifted some things around, and I moved to doing nights. I was doing 7 to 10 solo with my producer slash sidekick, Mike Lynch. And at that point, radio's a tough business, right? I kind of saw the writing on the wall that I wasn't going to be there for long. So I put everything that I had into doing that show and making a great show. And I got laid off about 6, 7 months later, which I expected. Still sucked, but it was expected. And just making sure that, again, being prepared, giving the listener what the listener wants, and putting on an entertaining show. And in Portland, it's different than doing a show in New York or Boston or St. Louis or Chicago in a place where you have two, three, four, five teams that everybody cares about. And with the seasons, in New York in the summer, you're talking Yankees and Mets, and then you're getting into Giants and Jets as you get closer to the fall, and then into the Knicks and the Rangers. And out here, it's not like that.
Right.
There's more broad topics. You do more national stuff. You do more stuff that has nothing to do with sports. The longest running afternoon show in Portland, a couple guys that I worked with for a long time, they have an entire hour of their show that is not sports at all. And they've been really, really successful with that. And
Where would they go with that one extra hour?
Anywhere you could possibly
Really?
think of, just like the most random stuff, like
What's like the most
random weird
random thing?
news topics, guy talk, like whatever it is. Like, and they're really successful with it. That's what they do. It's entertaining. That's not me though, right?
Right.
So like I grew up in New York where it's sports. Can I go down that direction sometimes and talk about whatever movies, whatever's interesting that day? Yeah, but I'm a sports guy first. So for me, like I didn't necessarily fit in there, and I didn't really realize it at the time because their direction was skewing a little bit more towards that,
Right.
and our personalities and our styles just weren't on the same page,
Right.
right? So I ended up at a place that I was at for a long time, the Blazers flagship, Rip City Radio. Almost a year later, it was a tough year, man, a real tough year. But that was something that was more my speed because it was driven by the Trailblazers, right? We were called Rip City Radio. It was an iHeart station. We were all in on the Blazers, and that was something that was a lot more my speed.
And that was in 2015, correct?
Yep,
If that
yep.
wasn't mistaken. What year? What I'm trying to recall. What did the Blazers do in 2015? Wait, don't tell me. Don't tell me. Wait, I can figure this one out. 2015. They, Dame and CJ. That was the year after they hit the that he hit the Patrick Bev shot over Chandler Parsons. I mean, that was the
That's
year
right.
after that.
Yep.
Did they lose? Did they play the Warriors in the first round?
No,
Second
that
round?
year, so
What did they do?
in the first round in 2015, they played Memphis, right?
Memphis.
And
Okay, yes.
they had traded for uh oh wow, my
Oh yeah, and
brain
the
just
Memphis Grizzlies played the Golden State Warriors in the second round because
yeah,
Tony Allen was on the team. Yes,
that's
yes, I
right.
remember that. I remember that.
Wesley Matthews tore his Achilles at the end of March,
Right, I do remember that.
and that they went into the playoffs and they ended up losing in 5 games in the first round to Memphis, and there was all that, LaMarcus Aldridge stuff going on.
I
He ended
know,
up
yeah.
leaving that fall, and yeah, that was kind of that last run of the Dame and LaMarcus team, and that was the year that because Wesley Matthews was hurt, CJ got an opportunity in the playoffs,
Right.
and that's when he kind of exploded. And then that fall, he was the starter.
I think like Alan Crabb was playing minutes for them at that like
Yep,
3-2-3 spot. I
yep.
remember. Who else was there? Was Myers Leonard still there?
Myers Leonard was there. Yep, that
Myers
was at
Leonard was
his. Oh yeah,
there.
he was drafted the same year as Dame, so that
Right.
was his third year. Yep.
And Batum was gone by that year too. I think
No, he was still there. He
he
so
was
th
there in 2015
that
too.
summer, the
Really?
summer of 2015, Wesley Matthews had a torn Achilles. He
Yeah,
left and went to Dallas.
I remember that.
LaMarcus
Yes.
Aldridge went to San Antonio, and that was the
Yep.
summer that Nick Batum signed with Charlotte.
You're right. Yeah,
So the
that's what I was
Blazers trying to
thinking.
regroup, and they had this young backcourt of Dame and CJ. They bring in Ed Davis
Davis,
and
right?
Robin Lopez, Al-Farouq Aminu,
Hmm.
and that was kind of the core that eventually got them to the Western Conference Finals in 2019.
So that was what was I wanted to talk about next. So that season from like preseason to Western Conference Finals, can you talk a little bit about what you thought about like that group? Because like,
Yeah.
you can obviously tell early on in the season like whether a team is going to be good or not. You know what I mean? I know
Yeah.
they were like a little low in the standings. And I remember they like started picking it up towards the end of the year, like after the All-Star break, to make like a top three spot in the Western Conference. But just take me through that season.
That's right. It's a great memory. So for me, my first full-time season in this role was 2019, 2020. My predecessor, Brian Wheeler, who passed away last fall, had some health problems. So that year that you're talking about, I filled in and I called between the preseason, regular season, and playoffs, I called 57 games. So I was around that team in training camp. I was around them in the preseason, and they were coming off of a horrific playoff loss, getting swept by New Orleans the year
Right.
before.
Yes.
Drew Holiday killed the Blazers. Anthony Davis was
Rondo
unbelievable in that
too.
series. And there were some people who were surprised that the Blazers kept Terry Stotts going into the following season, and they didn't really make any big moves that year, right? Yusuf Nurkic was the center. He had a big run at the end of the regular season the year before. They brought in Seth Curry, as a sharpshooter from the outside. And in the beginning of the season, there were some struggles, right? Early in the year, they lost an overtime game at home to Washington,
Right. Mhm.
some tough games. And what was interesting is Yusuf Nurkic broke his leg
Against
in
Brooklyn, I
mid-March
remember
in a
that.
game against the Nets.
Yeah.
That was a home game against the Nets. And we had just brought in Enes Kanter to be the backup center. And Nurk was having an awesome year, right? So when that happens, it's like great. We just lost, one of our best players. And he really was fantastic up to that point. So the from that point on, we went on a long road trip starting in Chicago. We left the morning after Nurk broke his leg the night before. And I remember it just being a weird plane ride, right? Because everyone was just kind of like, well, what do we do now? And they started playing really good basketball.
Right.
And they go down the stretch and they win 50 plus games. And like you said, they ended up being the 3 seed. And they were the 3 seed the year before. I think they were the 3 seed the year before when they lost to New Orleans. Maybe they were the 4 seed. But because they were playing well down the stretch, and because by that time, Dame was Dame, right?
Right. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
he was fantastic. CJ was great. You had good defensive wings with Maurice Harkless and Al-Farouq Aminu, but you didn't know if they could get the job done offensively. The bench had some questions. Evan Turner was
Turner.
brought in. The role that he was initially put in wasn't really one that he thrived in, and the fans were kind of using him as a scapegoat. And eventually things, worked out for him. And I
Right.
love ET; he's great. But I remember going into the last game of the season playing Sacramento, and basically they played six guys, right? Because they did not want to win that game. They wanted to play Utah in the first round of the playoffs. And
That's
they
it. I
played
remember.
six guys, like all rookies. And the Kings had a big lead in that game, and Anthony Simons went off as a rookie that had basically never played. He had 37 points. The Blazers came back and won, and they ended up playing Oklahoma City in the first round.
Right.
And the Thunder had handled them in the regular season.
Yeah.
So, like Nate McMillan always said, I'll paraphrase, so there's no expletives here. Don't mess with the basketball gods because they'll mess with you right back. Well,
Yeah.
the Blazers kind of did that a little bit. Okay, we want to set things up to play Utah. That didn't happen. They played Oklahoma City, and obviously we know what happened from then on.
What was that series like? Because the whole like Dame and Russ beef was going on with like when they clipped Russ saying like, cause I don't want to say like explicit, but like, I've been like killing you for like over like every year basically of your
Yeah,
career. So what was that like covering that entire series
yeah.
and then seeing him hit the walk-off shot at the end?
Yeah. So that series, I didn't call any of those games. My predecessor did, and that
Right.
ended up it was actually the final series that he called. Dame's three, the wave goodbye through was actually the last play that he ever called. He ended up retiring after the year. So I was watching that with the rest of the media up in the auxiliary media
Right.
section. And they win. I think they won games 1 and 2, and then went back to Oklahoma City, lost
Lost
game
three.
three, won game
Mhm.
four. So they're up 3 games to 1. They come back for game five. And, at that point, people in the Northwest don't really like the Thunder, right? Because the whole
Really?
Sonics thing, you're probably too young to remember the Sonics, but there was a big rivalry between the Blazers and Sonics.
I didn't know that.
And there are a lot of Sonics fans that have become Blazers fans because there's no team in Seattle
Right.
anymore. And, Blazers fans took that personally too, right? Because they love that I-5 rivalry. So there's a lot of animosity towards Oklahoma City. And then Russell Westbrook is one of the most dislikable basketball players in the NBA. I want to kind of qualify that because as a guy, I am a huge fan of Russell Westbrook. when he's on the other team, you can't stand him, right? He is a pain in the ass. He chirps, he's physical, he baits you into things, and he's a really damn good player. He's a Hall of Famer for a reason. So the chirping that he had, it was warranted,
Right.
right? It was deserved because the Thunder had handled the Blazers. So going into that game 5, we all felt like the Blazers really had to win that game because going back to game 6 was going to be tough.
Yeah.
And then Dame comes out and drops a 50 piece,
Right.
and he's got
13
that.
threes.
Yeah, he was
It
unbelievable.
was insane.
And then that last play of the game, where Paul George called it a bad shot, that 37-foot step back three. I mean, it's a bad shot for most. It's not for Dame. That's right in his range. I mean, that place. I've been in that building for a lot of really cool moments. I was in that building when Dame hit the shot over Chandler Parsons.
Mhm.
Brandon Roy's, big game winner over Houston.
You were there
Just some
for
really
that?
big
Oh my
moments.
God.
Yeah,
That game
Brandon
was
Roy was
sick.
unbelievable. I've never heard that building explode like it did when Dame hit that shot. And there's a video of it from where I was sitting, and he brings the ball up, and he's coming this way towards me. So I'm sitting back up here a little bit. He's coming this way, and it's loud. He steps back to take that shot, and it was as quiet as could possibly be. And I didn't really realize it till I went back and watched that video. The ball goes through and the place goes crazy. Just the natural sound from that moment, it was unbelievable.
Man, I remember my when watched that I was actually in Greece playing basketball
Yeah.
on like a trip, and I stayed up just to watch that in because I actually Russell Westbrook actually is like my favorite point guard in the NBA, so I
Yeah.
was like gunning for like it to be a long series, and I'd also played for what do you call it, the Riverside Hawks that I was telling you before, and we
Mhm.
were Adidas sponsors, so we all got free Damian Lillard shoes, so it was a little bit
Awesome.
of like a toss up there, which
That's
guy I
cool.
wanted to win that series, but. I went to bed and I woke up thinking the Thunder were going to win because they had like a pretty big lead at one point. Like they were up
Yep.
like most of the game, I remember. And then I see it all over Bleacher Report, House of Highlights, like close-ups of this thing. The ball like curved, I remember, in the air and it just like
Yeah.
splashed in. I was like, there's no way he shot it from there. I initially thought of the Steph Curry shot against Oklahoma City when he
Yeah.
like pulled up on the break, but like that
Yep.
wasn't the playoffs or like a closeout game of anything of that magnitude. But yeah,
To
that's
do
got to be
that
like
in a walk-off situation where
right.
where you send the team home. Obviously, at the time, Oklahoma City kind of dismantled their team a little bit, right? They traded Russ.
Oh yeah, that broke up like a
KD was
whole
already
era.
gone by then. What's that?
I said that like broke up like a whole era of the Oklahoma City Thunder. Sent them in a rebuild
It
basically.
did. It totally did. And at the time, it was like, well, the Blazers Dame just ended the Thunder.
Yeah.
Looking back on it a few years later, the Thunder have done okay since then. But at the time, it was like it was kind of trying to find a friendly way to put it. But it was a dagger for Oklahoma City.
100%. So I like to have let's have a little fun here.
Yeah.
Since we're talking Blazers basketball, let's go all-time starting fives. Your Blazers all-time starting five, and it's my Blazers all-time starting five.
Man. Oh, that's tough. Because there's a couple of positions that are totally loaded, right? So I think Dame's your point guard. There's
Dame's
no
gotta be
question.
your point guard.
Bill Walton's your center.
Right? Yeah, I mean you could go either way though. If you want, you could take Bill Walton. I'll go like put LA at my five.
Hmm. So I'll say this about LA playing the five. He did play five, and
Yeah,
I won't argue that he did play five. He hated playing five.
really.
So yeah,
I
he
didn't
did,
I
and
didn't
that was
know
one of the
that.
reasons. That was one of the reasons why he left.
They had like Greg
But
Oden
so
back in the day too.
what's that?
They had Greg Oden back in the day too, playing the five. Like in the younger before pre Damian Lillard, they had Greg Oden on that team. I remember.
Well, that's the thing is it was Brandon Roy, LaMarcus Aldridge, and Greg Oden, and that
Right.
was supposed to be the future. And then
Yeah.
Oden had all of his injuries, and then Roy had all of his injuries, and I think they were something like 53-10 when they played in the game together. They were
Right.
dominant when they played. They were so good. It's unfortunate what happened,
They had
but
Andre Miller playing the point. Oh my
yeah,
gosh.
yeah. Andre Miller was something else, man.
In
He
his
was great.
prime, yeah.
Yeah.
If you were to take
So
down, I was taking like Andre Miller if I'm being honest with you.
yeah, yeah. I mean, if you're looking for a true point guard, I can see that.
You
So I
get
would go
Clyde.
Dame, Bill Walton, Clyde Drexler.
Yeah.
the power forward position is always tough, right? Do you go with
Aldridge.
uh you can go back to the championship year with a guy like Maurice Lucas, who's the enforcer, or LaMarcus Aldridge,
Yeah.
who he's LA. If we're looking at like today's style of basketball, you got to go LA, right? That
Right. Yeah.
fadeaway was unbelievable. Uh,
The
Small forward
three.
position's tough. I mean,
You can
you
go
could
small.
slide Drexler
Drexler.
to the
Yeah.
three and play B Roy at the two, and I think that's what I might do.
Yeah. Honestly, so I'm going like second hand here. You guys would like probably blow me out by like 50. I can't even.
What you got?
No, I mean like if I had to pick a Blazers starting five, I
Yeah,
don't know. Like you have to go Dame. I don't know. Like I know I'm a little recency biased. I know
sure.
Brandon Roy. He was cold. Like he was a really good
Yeah.
player. But CJ McCollum, like what I saw him do in that game seven against the Nuggets. What do you have like 47 points? I remember like that punch dribble over Torrey Craig. I remember to ice the
And he had
game.
that chase down block too that was
Yeah,
huge.
Jamal Murray. No,
Yep.
that was one of like the most insane
Yeah.
performances I've ever seen. Like actually watching a game. I was watching it on Hulu on my phone driving back from a road trip from an
No
Asian
kidding.
tournament. And I remember just like screaming in my car. My dad asked me what was going on. I was like, "Oh my God, CJ McCollum, he's insane!" Like
Yeah, he carried that second half because they had 37 points in the first half and they were down big.
Dame had
And
like
CJ
zero
had a
points.
monster second half.
I remember Dame didn't score until like he hit that one kick out three. Like he stole it from Jokic and he kicked out corner
Yep.
three, and that was like his first point of the game.
Yep.
Small forward, I don't know, honestly. Like I said, you could go Drexler there. You could go really small, put B Roy there, but like, I don't know if I want to do that. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? I would definitely go LaMarcus Aldridge. I like him. Honestly, I like Odin at my five. Yeah, him in his prime, the athleticism there.
Yeah.
LaMarcus Aldridge, I liked him at I like him at the four. I don't know who I'll put at the five though. Probably Drexler, honestly. You have to.
Yeah. See, around here, like the way that people talk about like the greatest player in franchise history, right?
Right, yeah.
The three players that are in the conversation are Dame, Clyde Drexler, and Bill Walton. You know, Bill Walton won an MVP. He was the best player on a
I
championship
know.
team, but he had a short run of it because of the injuries,
Yeah, exactly.
right? Clyde he was Clyde, man. He was unbelievable. Took the team to a couple of finals. Had a long stretch, and Dame's just Dame. You know, greatest scorer in team history, and all the things that he's done. And it really depends on what you're qualifying that with. Like, does Bill Walton get it because he led the team to their only title? Does Game get it because he has the most points in franchise history? Does Clyde get it because he was at that time, and I know you're a little young, at that time, the conversation was the best player in the NBA is Michael Jordan.
And then it was
The
Clyde.
second best player in the league is Clyde Drexler. And
Right,
you'll see
yeah.
behind me, I've got Dame and Clyde, or MJ and Clyde from the '92 finals
Wow.
on the wall behind me. Like it's I was young. Like I remember watching the '92 finals. I was in fifth grade on a whale watch trip to Cape Cod. And we watched the NBA finals, the Bulls Blazers NBA finals in our hotel room. So I was pretty young then too, but Clyde was fantastic.
So let's focus on game day now. So
Yeah.
let's walk us through a particular game day for you. So like from the moment you wake up to tip off, what's your preparation routine look like? Like what's going on before you go on the air?
Well, today's a game day, so it's pretty good. It works out pretty well. If we're talking about a home game day, right? Because I travel with the team, a road game day is a little
Right.
bit different. But let's talk about a home game day. When I wake up on a game day, 90% of my prep work is done.
Okay.
All right. So I have these, and I actually have one right here I can show you. I've got my templates that I build out. I get all that stuff done. Some of that stuff you can't get done until game day, but I try and get all that stuff done as much as I can ahead of time. Like if I'm finished with today's game and I have time, I'll start working ahead to the next games. So I'll get most of that stuff done. In the morning, depending on the day, I'll usually get up about 6:45, take my kids to school, come home and just dive right into some more prep. Make sure that everything's done. If it's the second night of a back to back, there's more work to do, and it take a couple of hours and get that done. Shower, get ready, all that stuff. I get to the arena around 4 o'clock for a 7 o'clock game. And I'll do when I get there, I'll print out all my stuff, put all my boards together, make sure there's no notes or anything that I missed. We also at noon will have a production call with TV and radio and go through all the details and the storylines and things we're talking about for the day. So once all my stuff is printed out and I'm ready to go, I'll go do a coach's interview at 5 o'clock. We'll get Chauncey Billups once every 4 or 5 games. The other games in between, we'll do an assistant coach. Like the other night against the Warriors, we had Chauncey. Tonight we'll do Nate Bjorkgren. Once I get that done, send it back to the studio, make sure there's nothing else that I missed. Go to the media room, have some dinner, and then up at 6 o'clock, we're ready to go for the pregame show. And for my prep, everybody does theirs differently. All right, everybody has a different way of doing it. This is what my notes look like for a Blazers game. I picked a Knicks
Whoa.
game since you're in New York, or you're
Uh-huh.
from New York. So I've got everything laid out there with all the information that I could possibly need. I have one team on one side, the other team on the other, and then in the middle, I just got, game stats, important information. So everything that I could possibly need is right here.
Whoa, that's so cool, actually.
I can send you a copy of it too if you'd like.
Oh, of course. I would love to take a look at that.
Sure.
I feel I mean, like you're a basketball guy, like you're a hoop junkie, so of course
Yeah.
you're gonna know about like all like the field goal percentages and all that stuff.
Yep.
I remember I was working, I worked at NBA Summer League over the summer, and
Awesome.
I was working at the studio out there, the Summer League studio on the concourse, and we had to help set up. There's this program called Sports Business Classroom out there where it's like breaking into the basketball industry.
Hmm.
So like we had to help assist the medium broadcast students like do play by play out there,
Cool.
and like we had to prepare the sheets for them. It was like a Knicks Pacers game where they would go watch a summer league game and do it.
Hmm.
Like like I know basketball, but I can't imagine like someone like who really doesn't watch that much basketball because there's some people who obviously work in sports that don't like watch as much basketball, and that's like okay.
Sure.
But like if you're looking at like those numbers and stuff like that, like it could get like insane in your head, like not understanding who's who and what's what.
Totally.
Was that ever an issue for you, getting confused with like all the stats and numbers, the players?
Not necessarily like in the NBA, no, right? Because I've been watching ball my whole life, so I know
Right.
who guys are.
Yeah,
I'm a
exactly.
nerd when it comes to numbers and stuff like that. So with the NBA, I don't think I've ever had that problem. I've done a lot of high school basketball over the years,
Right.
and for a long time, I was doing the state championship tournament every year. And so with that, I mean, you're getting the rosters of the teams a couple of days beforehand. You're trying to put stuff together. Finding information on high school players is real tough.
Right.
Stats aren't always, you're not always getting everything for everybody. You try and talk to the coaches a little bit, but sometimes because high school coaches aren't used to having a lot of media around, they don't want to tell you a whole lot, which is,
Right.
understandable. I respect that. And with that, you're watching some of these guys for the first time. So you're doing a lot of the looking up and down. And then after
Right.
about 5 minutes or so, you figure out who the players are, especially who the main people are. But
Yep.
you've got to learn how to be quick at doing this. And same thing, I've done a lot of high school football as well. I've done lacrosse. That was challenging because I never
Oh,
played lacrosse.
yeah.
You know what it's like on the East Coast. Lacrosse is huge,
Oh
right?
yeah. I
And
went to a prep school. Like
right.
lacrosse was huge over there.
Exactly. My high school's always been great at lacrosse. My college has been great at lacrosse. I played baseball, and baseball players and lacrosse players didn't really get along,
Really?
right?
Okay.
Yeah, at least back then. This is,
I didn't know that.
25 plus
I
years
mean, they
ago.
don't hang out over here either. I can tell you that, but I
No.
didn't know it's like a history type of thing.
Yeah, lacrosse players would, say that baseball players were soft. Baseball players would say that lacrosse players quit baseball because they couldn't hit a curveball, things like that. And so I did some field lacrosse when I was in college, and then I did indoor National Lacrosse League here, which is a lot closer to hockey than it is to lacrosse.
Right.
It's a Canadian sport, box lacrosse. That was a lot of fun, but I had no idea who any of the players were going into that. So I had to study. If I had to do soccer right now, I don't know anything about soccer. You
Right.
know, I
I couldn't tell
I'd,
you.
I'd
So.
be in a lot of trouble there. Like I know people who do a lot of Olympic sports, right? They'll do, volleyball and wrestling and swimming and all that stuff. I've never done any of that stuff. I've done horse racing, which is the most difficult thing I've ever had to do. but trying to do one of those other sports that not only do I not know the players and any of those details, but I don't really know how, the rules of the game and stuff like that, that would be really challenging for me.
Right.
The four major sports, if I had to step in right now and do baseball, football, basketball, hockey, I could do those. It'd take a little work to prep and everything, but I could do those. Any of the other sports, I think I would have a hard time with.
Wow. No, I don't think I'd be able to do anything like other than basketball if I'm being totally honest with you. I could talk football with you, I could talk
Yeah.
baseball with you, but when it comes down to like the nitty-gritty, like looking at like the stat, like I don't know Aaron Judge's like batting average and stuff like that. Like I couldn't I
But that's what prep is for, right?
right,
So
yeah,
like in
exactly.
here, I've got all of the details. Like I'm just looking at this game, which was on March 12th last year. This was a game at the Knicks beat the Blazers at Moda Center in overtime on a Mikal Bridges walk-off three.
Right.
So let's go to Mikal Bridges. I don't have my glasses on, which is a bad idea. Where is he? Down there, 25. So I've got his, height, weight, years, all that stuff, points per game, 17.2, rebounds, field goal percentage, all that stuff. His last game, he had 15 points in 33 minutes in a win over the Kings. And then just some other details like he was shooting 28% from three since the All-Star break. In 19 career games against the Blazers, he was shooting 48% from three. Before the All-Star break, 3.3 assists per game. After the
Okay.
break, 4.5 assists per game. So that's just Mikal Bridges. So I have that
Oh, so
stuff
you have a
on
lot.
all of these players. I might not use all of that, but if,
Right.
if he's got a game like in that game, if he had 7 assists, which is not like him, I
Right.
could go back to those assist numbers and something like that.
Oh, okay, that makes sense. That makes total sense. So on the topic of since we're still on the topic of the Portland Trailblazers,
Yeah,
Damian Lillard is back in town now.
yeah.
And I know he's not gonna suit up, probably not this season, but what would like the call be when he's like finally checking back in, like in a Blazers uniform?
Oh man,
Like
I
have you
haven't
been
quite.
brainstorming?
I haven't thought about that yet because it's not going to happen this year. He was asked
Right.
at media day, like, okay, what happens if the Blazers are a number one seed going into the playoffs? Are you going to come back? And his response was, if they're a number one seed going into the playoffs, they don't need me. So he's not playing this year. Which, come back from that kind of injury at his age, let him take all the rest that he needs. Um, I've been fortunate enough to call all of his 60-point games. I called his 71-point game. I've called some big moments for Dame when he shoots one from the logo or just inside that. I'll say that's Dame distance, things like that. There's a couple little things I say like I've stolen a lyric or two from his music. Like if he goes on a heater, I'll use a line from one of his songs, his Dame Dollar throwing money at the rim, stuff like that. But in that particular moment when he finally comes back. I'd imagine it'll be October of 2026. I haven't quite given that any thought yet.
I can't imagine what that arena is gonna be like. I mean, you saw the love in that game when the Bucks finally came back and Simons had himself a
Yeah.
game. Like what was that, like
Yep.
2 years ago, I want to say.
hmm
I remember that game with the video tribute. You saw the love in there, so I can't imagine like him in that uniform once again. Oh
They
man,
had a rally in downtown Portland a couple weeks
really?
ago, and it was packed. It felt like a championship rally, and it was just a welcome back Dame rally. People here love Dame.
So looking ahead, do you see yourself continuing to build within the NBA world, or do you have any other long-term goals for your broadcasting career?
If I had it my way, I would do this job until I retired. My kids are here. Their mom isn't moving. I don't have any interest in going anywhere else. I love this team. I've been covering them for 20 plus years. I really enjoy being around the Trailblazer and this organization and this team. I like Portland. So if I had it my way, I would be working with the Blazers in this capacity until I retire. If that's another 20 plus years, great. The industry doesn't always work that way. It can be tough. So I don't know what I would do. I don't have an interest to leave and go work for another team. I like working for a team because you really get to know in and out everything about the
Right.
team, right? If the opportunity was there to do some national stuff, um, it's tough because you don't have a home base. I mean, you're home, but you could be, let's just say you're doing NBA games. You could be in Dallas one night. You could be in Cleveland one night. You get your schedule, sure, but you're not home for a 5 game homestand. Everything just about is on the road, and that's tough. I I don't work in the summer right now. I used to do a talk show in addition to the Blazers stuff until a couple of years ago. My kids are little. I got two boys. They're 7 and 5, so I get the summers off with them, and we play basketball in the backyard and things like that. And I really love that. I would love to do some baseball, especially if Portland ever got a team. But, that would be on more of like, hey, we need somebody to fill in on a road trip or two. Are you available? Yeah, absolutely. I would love to do that. I wouldn't want to be a full-time Major League Baseball announcer, mainly because I'd never see my kids when they're off in the summer. When the WNBA comes around next summer, I think it'd be a lot of fun to do some of those games. Portland is a great women's sports town. I don't know if you saw the response that the Valkyries had in Golden
Right.
State this year.
Yep.
I think it's gonna be very similar here in Portland, so it would be fun to do some work with them. But yeah, if I could be with the Blazers for the rest of my career, I would be very happy.
I hope there's a WNBA season next year. I saw there was
Yeah,
this article about like the play, like a potential like lockout or something of that magnitude. I hope it's
yeah.
not true though. I
I hope they
do
get
think
it
they
figured
deserve
out.
money. I think they deserve to be paid if I'm being honest with you.
Yeah, it's a tough spot. I haven't done all the research,
Right.
but
Yeah, same, like
it
likewise.
it's a revenue situation, right? Like they're
Right.
not they're not going to make the money that the NBA players make
Oh
because
no.
the league doesn't generate the same
Yeah.
kind of revenue. But if some of these teams are being valued at 300 plus million dollars and
Mhm.
you have players that are making 50, $60,000, something seems a little off there.
Oh yeah, 100%. Also, like what I started thinking about, like viewership and brand endorsements have gone up for the league as well.
Yeah.
Like especially like the NBA helps a lot now as well. Like you see guys who seasons like end pretty early that aren't playing in late June, and the WNBA is starting to start up over the summer. You see guys coming to sit at courtside, like kind of bringing that like next fan experience. And
Yeah.
then now like their fans like, oh, like he likes this player, like, oh, let me check it out. It's like kind of like a ripple effect of everything I've seen starting to happen over the last couple of years.
Yeah, it totally is. And like Brandon Pajimski in Golden State was like the number one Valkyries fan.
Yeah.
Like he was all about it. NBA players, they love the
And you
WNBA.
have
We were
Tyrese
really
Halliburton.
fortunate a couple of years ago. We were in Phoenix for a preseason game, and there was a WNBA Finals game that night. They were playing Chicago, so they bumped our start time up to like 1 o'clock, I think it was. And then we stuck around and watched the WNBA Finals game
Right.
in Phoenix. And it was a really cool experience. The building was packed. The place was going nuts. It was great basketball. Obviously, for a finals game, you would expect it to be that. But I think there's a lot of really good things in store for that league.
So finally, when you look back years from now down the line, how do you hope that fans will remember your voice and your impact on Trailblazers basketball?
And it's an interesting question because I'm following in the footsteps of two legends. Right now, I'm the fourth person that has done this full time since the Blazers started in 1970. Bill Schonely, who is the guy who coined the term Rip City, he's as legendary as anyone in this franchise history. He did it for 29 years. Brian Wheeler took over and did it for 21 years. There was a couple of years in between where Bill Schonely went to TV and they brought in Eddie Doucette for a couple of years. He's a Hall of Famer too. He was the Bucks broadcaster for a long time. He's the guy who coined the term skyhook with Kareem. So there have been legendary broadcasters and Hall of Famers sitting in the chair that I get to sit in right now, and it's kind of overwhelming sometimes. So I know that I'm never going to be them. And what Bill Schonely told me is just be yourself, do your thing, don't try and be anybody else. When I was a kid listening to the radio, when my parents wouldn't let me watch TV, I could see what was happening. That's the experience that I want people to have when they listen to me, is being able to see what's happening. And I love this team. I love this organization. I love this city. And I want people to be able to feel that when they listen, right? There's a fine line between being a homer and being passionate,
Right.
right? Like I'm not just gonna totally crap on the refs all the time and everything towards the Blazers. But like last year, that game we were just talking about, Mikal Bridges hits a game-winning three as the Knicks walk off the floor in a game that the Blazers had won if they can get a stop there. And I went back and heard the call. I'm like, man, I sounded really disappointed. And the fans feel that, and the fans feel the same way. Coincidentally, my best friend is a huge Knicks fan because we both grew up on the East Coast and I grew up a Knicks fan. And he's like, dude, come on, you just called the Knicks game winner in overtime and you sounded like that. I'm like, yeah, I work for the Blazers. Of course I sounded like that. I want people to remember the passion that I have for what I do, the the care, the time, the effort that I put into doing what I do, because I want the fans to have the kind of experience listening to me that I would want to have listening to, my favorite team. So when 20 years from now, 30 years from now, when people look back at my career and I look back at my career, I want people to say that he loved this team, he loved what he did, and we loved listening to him because of it.
Well, Travis, thank you so much for coming on the show today. It was a pleasure to talk to you and to meet you again. And good luck with the rest of this upcoming season. Thank you so much.
Ashton, the pleasure is mine. Thanks so much.
Thanks for listening to Gen Z Hoops. Make sure to follow, like, and subscribe on Instagram, LinkedIn, and all major social media platforms at Gen Z Hoops. You can tune in and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and every other podcast platform on the planet. Get ready for the next episode.